Sal Capaccio joining now on the Western Hotline. Yeah, my one baseball rooting interest this year is that the Rockies don't win 58 games.
Well, you should text.
I went under
you should
on
text
that.
Our
big under.
You should text our friend Frank Arcury about this. Then.
Well, really, like
that's his team. That's his misery.
The fun part about the bet is I wake up 4 times a week feeling good because they're so bad. They might not win the bet, but the Yankees are doing okay, aren't they, Sal, to start the season? They're first.
Yeah, they had a sweep last night of the Royals. Judge hits a home run in the 8th to break the tie. They win it. Bellinger, if you haven't seen it, Cody Bellinger made a great catch to end the game in right field.
They just showed it on SportsCenter, I think, actually, as you just said.
There you go.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. They lose Juan Soto, and obviously it's devastating, right? No doubt about that. But in a lot of ways, they upgraded some things because Bellinger comes in. They sign him. He plays right field. That allows Judge. Judge is normally a right fielder, but they could put Grisham in left, Bellinger in right, take a little bit off Judge every once in a while. Because Bellinger can play anywhere, and he made a great catch. So a little less wear and tear on Judge being in center field a lot. Anyway, the point is 11-7. They look good. You know what? Tonight they start a series in Tampa. Now I was just down there, guys. Just got back from vacation yesterday. That stadium was damaged by the hurricane in Tampa. So all of their games are at the Yankees spring training home of Steinbrenner Field. So the Yankees are in Tampa tonight at the Yankees spring training home for the next 4 days, which is smaller than, I believe it's smaller than Salem Field. You know, I mean, it's a spring training complex. So yeah, and a very minor league. It's not AAA. So yeah. Anyway, good morning to you guys. And that Rockies bet I did not know about to you. The Colorado Rockies, by the way,
they're so bad.
They were the first NHL team I ever remember moving.
Oh, okay.
And there's been a lot of NHL teams that moved. You guys know who the Rockies became?
They're the Devils. The Devils.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. They were the first team I ever remember actually moving in the NHL.
Yeah. Sal Capaccio now on the Western Hotline.
That clip. The Devils.
How was Tampa? It was a perfect time of year weather-wise, isn't it, to go down there?
Yeah, it was great. So, we have family down there. My mother-in-law lives in Venice, which is a little south of Tampa. That's where we were for the first day. Mm-hmm. Then we drove up to Orlando, and we were going to do Disney. We haven't done Disney in a while, but we're not like this huge Disney family, but we wouldn't mind going. But man, holy cow, the prices at Disney!
Oh, they are insane. I'll see that later. Maybe it's crazy.
Yeah, so we looked into it a little bit, and I said, you know what? Let's do that. We'll do that another time. We can kind of plan it out a little bit more and not just haphazardly go about it. But we went to Legoland, and we've done that. And Max is still at the age where Legoland's cool. It's cool for me. I'm 52, right? Yeah. So, and the wait lines are not bad at all, and it's a lot cheaper. It's really cool. A great water park. We did that. Then we drove to Tampa. We went to the Sabres game in Tampa Sunday night. Well, that was nice when they were up 2-1 at the end of the first period. I'll tell you this, guys. They do it right now. It's a lot easier when it's warm out and year round like that. They have a really great atmosphere outside the arena and inside the arena, but you get like a party in the plaza type vibes from what the Sabres years ago. But it's even more so. Like they have games for the kids, a whole bunch of stuff. They have a band and music, I should say, a DJ. They have a bar right out there. It's really cool. And that was a really cool experience. And we had done that before. But you go early to the games, you hang out in the parking lot. They're not the parking lot, the plaza there. That was cool. And then go inside the game. They have a really nice atmosphere inside the game as well. Obviously it was frustrating with the end result for the game. Yeah, and then we went back down to where my mother-in-law lives and spent a couple of days in Venice and got some sunshine.
Nice. I was seeing a clip of the Bruins-Sabre series from 14 years ago yesterday, and the party in the plaza just looked like a mob of people like under a pavilion. Yeah. And that was pretty much it. But it was a great time. But, right, like if they ever do get in, we can have that conversation. Like, can we get a band in there? Can we get some activities? Because when I did a fan village at the World Cup of Hockey, I think it's like what you were talking about. Like, there were games everywhere, and hey, see how fast your slap shot is.
Yep.
And like, there's a target practice thing, and that was really cool, especially for the kids, right? Like, that's a really cool thing for the kids. So
yeah, they have a thing called Deke shot something. I can't remember the pro Deke. I don't remember it, but it's like a little thing of, it's kind of like synthetic ice basically, and it's a cool game.
Yeah.
And Max did it, but it was a cool game where all the kids did it. I did it too. I mean, adults too. And they literally, like, there's a red dot, and you got to put the puck over it, and it's just back and forth. And where you see the red dot, you get 45 seconds to see how many you can get. Then they had that inside the actual arena too during intermissions. You can go and play that same game. They had things like that. So the scoreboard, obviously, we have a great scoreboard here now in Buffalo. Is they, redid it, but it's just the arena itself. Now, I got to tell you, I had gone to games years ago in Tampa, and it's still frustrating to me because I have this thing in my mind where I just don't think that the crowd is kind of a, it's a front-running crowd, right? I mean,
Sure.
it's still, it's hockey in Tampa, and yes, they've won cups, and they are happy about that, but I don't think they're true hockey fans and people. And maybe I'm just being a little bit, begrudging of their, winning, and jealous. And there's no doubt about that. But you look and say, man, this is a great atmosphere. How come they get this? We deserve this in Buffalo. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's tough to have that tested, too, down there when they haven't had a bad season in, 30 years. When was the last time they've had a bad season? It's been a while.
Yeah, that's right.
Sal Capaccio on the Western Hotline. We're 1 week from the draft, catching back up with Sal. And you did a mock draft special, the simulator with Matt Beauvais, and it's always game day in Buffalo. How are you thinking about the draft? Are you thinking any differently about it than when we would have last spoken to you? I heard you on, I don't know if you said this with us too, but I definitely heard you with Chopin Bulldog one of the last days you were on before you went down to Florida, that you think top 3 picks very likely to be defense. Are you still feeling that that's very likely for the Bills?
Yeah, in fact, what I said, and I'll say it again, is at this point I'd be surprised if it's anything other than defense, the first 3 picks. Now, we don't know the Bills' board, and I always say, sure, the Bills could really fall in love with a wide receiver that he happens to drop. They take him. I don't mean first round, though. I think I find that very hard to see. I mean, if he's that good, I think another team would grab a guy who's falling like that, wide receiver. So I'm thinking even second round that could happen. But just taking that out of the equation, I'd be really surprised if it's anything but defense. Now, that's assuming they stay where they are or relatively similar to where they are, Joe, right? If they trade back and all of a sudden they have 3 picks, but the third one isn't until mid-third round, I think things could change. That's when maybe they say, okay, we're going to evaluate wide receiver here. What did it look like elsewhere, and otherwise before that? So my thought is yes. Given where they are right now, where they are slotted to pick, if they pick in that general area for their first 3 selections, I think it's all defense. I don't think they draft offense until at least day number 3, day number 3, I should say, early on, maybe like 3rd, 4th round. Like I said, third round would be day number 2 if they get there. And I think at this point, I think it's mostly more likely to go heavy on the defensive line and then secondary, especially corner. I don't think you're getting 2 secondary players versus 1 D lineman. I think it's the other way. I think it's 2 D linemen versus 1 secondary player, most likely corner. I've never been on the safety thing. A lot of people, I think they will draft a safety. I just don't think that they're looking to draft one early on. Again, could circumstance dictate because they really love a guy and he starts to fall? Sure. But I think the way the roster's constructed, the way that they've talked, to me it points to they're going to draft a couple of defensive linemen and a cornerback out of their first 3 picks if they stay near where they are.
Yeah, we've talked about how on offense there just isn't really a need anywhere, but maybe for one more receiver. And it's interesting, I don't know how much you track their top 30 visits and how meaningful that is, but they have had, I think this is still true unless there's been a couple more that have changed this. They've had more receivers on visits than any other position. But if you look at who they are, they're almost all day 3 guys. They had a couple, like Isaiah Bond when they had him in, and they met with him at the combine too. He's someone that's been projected for round 2. That was before he had this sexual assault case, I should mention. And maybe there was one other day 2 guy, but a lot of day 3. And that's probably likely, isn't it, to you, Sal, that a round 4 pick, a round 5 pick, they're visiting with all these day 3 receivers who, by the way, all run sub 4.4. It almost feels like they're specifically looking for a very specific type of receiver on a specific day of the draft. And they're not really, to my eyes, there's no Luther Burden visit. Right? There's no Tet McMillan visit. There's nobody that I've seen them connected to that would be a round 1 or an early round 2 receiver.
I agree with that, and I think you make a really good point, and I think that's a great trail of breadcrumbs that you're leaving right there, which is what you can figure out about what they're looking for and how that fits into the draft. So specific type of receiver, you bring those guys in. They're not these highly regarded day 1 guys. So to me, I go back to what the Bills have said, which is, yeah, speed is great, but you want to make sure you draft a football player. So what's the reason by bringing in these guys, Joe, at this point, which is they're fast. Let's see if they're football players. Let's see what they know on the board and can do, and let's talk to them. Let's have them come in for visits and do everything we can do with them here. I think they're trying to find that particular player that they feel they're comfortable with. Maybe drafting on day number 3. I mean, because it's easy if it's a round 1 guy and you've seen him and you've done the work on him and you've been watching him all year and you've gone to the Senior Bowls or the Combines or whatever, and you can do that. Now, you can do it with other guys, but they're a little bit less heralded, so you want to make sure you're doing a little bit more homework maybe if you're looking for that specific guy, but he also has these other traits that you think are very important. And here's the reason why I also give you the D lineman cornerback thing, because I just pay attention to kind of how the Bills have talked and what the roster looks like. Okay, let's just go back to this is my reasoning about why I really think logically you could take steps and be a detective here. Okay, what did Brandon Beane say when Larry Ogunjobi was suspended? Why did they still? Well, you guys tell me. Why did they still sign Larry Ogunjobi even after the suspension? What did Brandon Beane say?
Well, what I remember is he made a comment about how at that point they some of the other names they could have gone after were gone, right? So the market wasn't the same as when they had decided they were going to sign him in the first place.
There were no other options, right?
Right.
Like, there were really no other options. Yeah. So what does that tell you? So that tells you, okay, there's nobody really out there as a veteran defensive tackle that they like. They told you that. They said it. They said it to themselves. There's no other options. That's why we stayed with Larry Ogunjobi. Well, right now, then you have Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Dwayne Carter, and Larry Ogunjobi was suspended for 6 games. Zion Logan, Branson Dean are on the roster. We're not going to count them because they're not really going to be counted on, I think, to be on the 53-man roster at this point. I mean, they kind of told you themselves that since that's the route that they couldn't go. So that tells me they're going to be looking heavy very early to get a guy that can make more of an impact right away at that position just by their own, way that they've spoken about that. Okay. On top of that, who did they have in for a visit yesterday? Bradbury, right? Or reportedly he's visiting it somewhat. Yeah. The cornerback, a veteran corner. There's other veteran corners still out there. I think that corner, they're telling you that by their own actions, that corner's a position where they could probably sign another guy. They signed Dane Jackson. They do have Christian Benford still on the roster, obviously extension. They still have Jamarcus Ingram. I think even though you're still light there and you're looking for more, to me it feels like they've kind of acted and even said that they're a little more comfortable at that spot where they don't need the immediate guy, but sure they need help. Versus defensive tackle, where I think they got to get one immediately that's got to help this team. Does all that make sense?
It does make sense. Sal Capaccio joining us on the Western Hotline. Sal, I do think there's a little bit of good fortune, though, in this as well. The Bills, one of their biggest needs is a one-technique defensive tackle.
Yes.
And this draft class is deep in the big boys this year, from Kenneth Grant in round 1 as a favorite prospect there, to guys like Darius Alexander or Alfred Collins or Deion Walker in round 2 or something of the like there. So it does benefit the Bills a little bit. Like if they don't get one of those guys in round 1, or there's a luxury pick, so to say, quote unquote, like a Luther Burden falls in round 1 and the Bills are there at 30 and they just shrug their shoulders and take him, for example. It does look like, though, that defensive tackle is not just deep where you can get a starter in round 3 this year, but exactly where they need it at the one technique.
Agreed 100% on all those points, Derek, which are, A, the need for that is certainly there, I think, for them. I think the Bills are looking to not replace, but upgrade and help out the Daquan Jones spot. Really, that's Daquan Jones' spot, but he's getting a little bit older, obviously. He came off the injury last year. He didn't have quite the same year, and that also impacted Ed Oliver. I think you really need someone next to Ed Oliver who can be that one technique, that penetrating guy. That's, again, I want to remind people who don't know, just in case you don't, one technique is a guy who generally plays more of a nose tackle, a little shaded over. He's over the guard a little bit more. Three technique is a guy that's a little bit more between the guard and the tackle. More, so just outside. So the lower the number, the more closer he is to the interior in the middle of the defensive line. So everybody gets an idea. So you need bigger guys there. You need stout guys. You need guys who can really hold up against the run, but also be able to penetrate. And I agree with you that they would look for that. And I also agree with you, Derek, that this draft seems like it has more of those kinds of guys. And that's obviously the best thing to have when you have need meets value, right? When you have need that meets depth of the draft and how it all looks. I agree with you there. I like Derek Harmon a lot. I like Tyleik Williams. I think these are guys that could fit that type of player. Walter Nolan, obviously, but we don't know where these guys. And we're talking. Look at these guys. Now look at some of them are a little bit shy of 300, and that's not. ideal necessarily, right? Like, but the game is played a little bit differently too, and these guys are such freak athletes that I don't think you have to have a 330-pounder there anymore. But sure, if you can go out and get Derek Harmon at 6'4.5", 313, or Kenneth Grant at 331, right? Let's give you some example. Obviously, you're getting a bigger body guy, so I don't think it has to be the body or weight necessarily, but I do think they want to look for power and some length right there.
There also is, Sal, like there's a filling a need just by. How we usually do this is we look at the depth chart and we look at roles and we say, okay, what don't they really have? What could they use an upgrade on? There also, you could file under need like the Bills wanting to be better at a certain thing. Like Jeremy mentioned yesterday when we were talking about Jacob Parrish, corner from Kansas State. I think he's a round 2 guy the Bills had on a visit earlier in the week. And Jeremy mentioned about like the third down defense, like how the Bills were very bad last year at third down defense, and like how might they want to attack that and get better at that? That you can go beyond just, they need this, and this on the depth chart. How do they want to accomplish that goal? Parrish, Joe Marino said, is like man coverage. He's going to be kind of a weird fit for the Bills if he were to ever be their round 2 pick, because it's almost sounded kind of like Elam. Like he's got to learn some nuances of a Bills system that he didn't experience in college. I wonder to you, though, not even on him specifically, like third down defense or certain situational things that you think the Bills want to get better at in this draft, and maybe what they've already accomplished, right? Like, is Michael Hoyt, like in our minds right now, is an answer to what we're talking about? Like, that's not even find a spot for him in the depth chart. It's more he's someone that you would think would help them on like third downs or in other specific situations.
I do. I think that the Bills really would like to be able to match up a little bit better this year, right, than they were last year. Maybe this could be a Matt Milano point too, right? If Matt Milano was healthier all year, if he was there, then maybe you have an ability to use Dorian Williams a little bit more, right? You know what I mean? A little bit different. You have an extra linebacker there, right? I mean, let's remember, it's not just Dorian Williams filling in for Matt Milano. It's what can you do when you go and maybe you need a third linebacker and you have to take Taron Johnson off the field. We've said this many times. Nobody loves to see Taron Johnson off the field. We understand that, but there are circumstances that dictate sometimes you might have to do that. So I think that could be something, and that's not necessarily third down, but that could be third and 2, right? Okay, like they're bringing in. It's not even down and distance a lot. It's really matching up personnel. I think the Bills want to match up personnel better. I think that's where Michael Hoyt definitely comes in. That you bring him up, which is now you have an ability to say, okay, against this team, they like to go and run more 3 tight ends. We can use him here, or we're not going to use him this game as much. We could use him on the edge in this game. I think that's where that goes. I wonder about big nickel, right? The Bills have not really had that true big nickel guy in a few years, and that's something maybe the Bills want to get back to. With Sean McDermott, something that was very successful him in Carolina when he was a coach there. So maybe that's something. And then there's a talk. We had a lot of this talk at the beginning of the offseason, guys. We haven't talked about it as much with the coaching staff changes. Which do they want to play more man to man this year? And I don't know. I think maybe, admittedly, even me, like I think we all made a little too much about that because they bring over Mike Pellegrino from the Patriot system. He was very much more well versed in it, and Ryan Nielsen, who's been more well versed in it. And I do think there's an element of we need to go to that a little bit more. There's no more, but I don't think that it's something like some whole philosophical change are going to play it a ton.
Yeah, well, and that is something that personnel dictates too, right, Sal? Like I'm thinking last year in the Chief game, I think McDermott even spoke about how they wanted to play more man coverage as that game went on, but did they really have the personnel at the end of the day to execute it? There was what I think the touchdown the Chiefs would have seen, okay, they're in man here, and they figured out a way to get Xavier Worthy on DeMar Hamlin. And like that's just a matchup you're never going to win. And Hamlin is someone this year that we don't think would be on the field in those spots other than injury. So maybe that's Bishop growth, or you just mentioned the big nickel idea. I'm just thinking a lot about what they want to be on defense, because haven't we kind of had the same thought about what they are for years and years, and maybe that changes. Maybe their normal tendencies of 2 deep safeties and Taron Johnson is always on the field. You just brought that up. Maybe it looks more different this year than it ever has.
Yeah, a guy that I know that Ryan Talbot is really great at reporting the visits, as you guys know, at Syracuse.com. He does the Shout podcast with Matt Perino. Ryan's always been great at reporting visits. I think he had Darian Porter as visiting, right? I think that's also a visitor, the cornerback.
Iowa State,
I'm a big Darian Porter guy, meaning like what he brings, the type of like athleticism and length that he has.
He's
like,
to me, that's 6'4", right? 6'4". Yeah.
And he's fast. I think he ran sub 4.4, I believe. So like those are the kinds of guys. In fact, if you guys remember, I really believed the Bills would love a guy like Tariq Woolen when he came out. Like I was on like, oh my God, this is the perfect guy for the Bills. He's got all these traits. The Bills love these freak athletes at a lot of these places, right? Look at the tackles they've drafted, right? Including Tommy Doyle, who's no longer obviously playing because of the injury, but Tommy Doyle with Spencer Brown, obviously. And then you look at the other side of the ball and, Greg Rousseau, Tremaine Edmonds, Josh Allen. Like they go for a lot of these freakish kind of guys that have these athletic traits. Like Tariq Woolen screamed that to me. Well, Lance Zierlein in his NFL profiles, he compares his comp, Darian Porter, to Tariq Woolen. Like, that's the kind of guy he is. And he says, hey, you can – and he's a zone guy, but he has the ability to play man. I mean, that to me is – okay, that to me, there's your kind of guy that you can bring in. And if you think highly enough of him, maybe he rises to – I don't know if he's a number 30 pick, but is that your second rounder, right? So I do think maybe that's the kind of guy that they would look at. But again, I thought they would think that about Tariq Woolen. They didn't. They had a few chances to draft him. They didn't. And Tariq Woolen became a really good NFL player, obviously.
Yeah, this is a very interesting player you bring up because I don't think we've mentioned him. And right, there's a visit there. Porter, he is – so at the combine, he was 6'3". He was listed at 6'3". He ran a 4.30. As you mentioned, so super fast 40. He was a 6-year senior, so he is older. Like he played college football with Brock Purdy at Iowa State.
I love that.
So he's been around.
Joe, it's so funny. It's a great point. I think this is a good discussion. Just kind of more of a in the weeds discussion about these players and these older players. You're getting a lot more of that now because of the COVID year. Really is a big deal. The medical red shirts that a lot of guys are getting granted now. The transfer portal. And sitting out a year if guys do that or anything. There's a lot of reasons now for this happening. And NIL, obviously, guys staying in school for another year. And I thought, in last year, I was surprised the Bills drafted a running back who was already 25 years old, Ray Davis. Ray Davis is 25 years old.
Right.
And he's like I think a little bit younger than James Cook, I believe. I have to look that up again. But
it's like by 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Yeah, my point is, though, like, I think in years past, I would say, I don't know if they're going to go for a guy like that. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think it's just the way college football and transitioning to the NFL is these days, where you can't be as choosy to say, well, that guy's a little bit too old for me. But that's a really good point you bring up. And I wonder about how that has changed over the years for the Bills and everybody else.
Definitely. Sal Capaccio on the Western Hotline. Sal, I want to wrap with this with you. Non-Bills. Yeah. While you were gone, there was Terran Armstead retiring in Miami. And I think that was while you were away because that was over the last week. And the GM yesterday, day before. Now they're going to move Jalen Ramsey. They're not going to move Tyreek Hill, but there's another police thing with him. How do you think of the Dolphins right now in their offseason? And the idea that this term was placed on the Bills, and it to me was always nonsense because of Allen, the quarterback, just being different in this way. But now I'm seeing lobbed at the Dolphins, okay, the same thing. The window is closed. But I kind of view that as like a real take now compared to what we heard when we heard it about the Bills last year.
Yeah, I thought last year their window might have started to close, but that was because I thought maybe Tua wouldn't stay healthy the whole year, and I felt if Tua doesn't stay healthy, they're just done. Like, and I don't know how they're going to recover because they were already getting older, and they lost a lot of guys last year. Actually, if you remember, Joe, and that's why they went out and signed like a Jordan Poyer, right? But they lost guys, and they had guys coming off major injuries, and Chubb and Jalen Phillips. Now, I think it's even further. Here's what I think about the Dolphins, and I agree. I tweeted the other day a couple poolside thoughts. Number one was what we just talked about the draft. I think it's heavy defense. Number two is I think the Patriots are the second best team in the division this year. They finished second, and part of the reason is I think the Patriots will be better. They'll be around a 500 team. Maybe they win. Maybe they're over that. Maybe they're slightly under that. Whatever. Part of it is because I think the Dolphins and Jets, the Jets are just kind of in full rebuild mode, it seems like, what they're trying to accomplish, but maybe they're finally doing it right. Where the Dolphins, to me, the way I view the Dolphins, they can't figure out themselves what they want to be, right? Like, It seems like they're caught in between, do we want to win or do we want to rebuild? And they're middling it so bad, and when they make their decision, it's too late. Like, what are you doing now? Shouldn't these things with shouldn't this with Jalen Ramsey have been kind of cleared up a long time ago, earlier this offseason?
How about before they had to pay him a $4 million roster bonus that's on their books now, no matter what? How about doing it before then?
That's exactly right. I would guess they would think Terran Armstead, knowing his situation, but you have to kind of plan for that. You have to be on top of these things. It just seems to me like they're almost late to their own party, essentially.
Yeah.
Right? If that makes sense. And I think that they're playing catch up on themselves, and they're caught in this space where they want to win, but they don't really have the ability to do it, and they haven't decided to go the other way, and that's never a good spot to be in. I think you kind of have to know who you are. I'm not tank guy, you know that. Even discussion for another day. Like, I never loved the tank for Eichel, McDavid. Like, it's just not. I don't think that's the way to go in. I get it why teams do it, but I do think you need to know who you are. And I think, like, the Jets, for example, know who they are. And the Jets are rebuilding, and that's okay, because they're not trying to lose games, but they understand that they have to kind of build it a different way this time. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think the Dolphins should be there, but they're not, and they're trying to win. They're not going to be able to do that either.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with literally everything. Sal Capaccio on the Western Hotline. Always game day in Buffalo. They had the mock draft simulator yesterday.
Yes.
So make sure to check that out. Picking at 30.
We simulated it, and then we got to pick 30, and then we talked about it. And we had some trade opportunities. We also have a very good question that I threw out there. I tweeted it yesterday about what's the longest light that you sit at in Western New York if you have one, or a series of lights. Because in Florida, oh my God, I felt like my life was just. You know what? Now I know why people retire down here. They just sit at these lights all the time, and by the time that the light changes, they've bought a house down here. Oh my God.
I have a good answer for this. Be sure to check it out. Thank you, Sal.
You got it, guys.
Sal Capaccio on the Western Hotline. Of course, the Mike North conversation, too, on the schedule. At least bookmark that for when we talk all-in schedule in the month of May, which is coming up in a couple of weeks.